Hello, Merry Christmas and welcome to Hard Copy from our channel's television studios in Abuja. I'm Kayla Magwa. Even before his death, former President Muhammadu Buhari had books written about him, from stories about his early life to his time in the military, and even as a civilian president, books have been written about what it was like working with him. With each book comes the inevitable controversy, the lack of connection between the man being portrayed on those white pages and the man millions of Nigerians simply did not like. His time in office has been described as a waste of 8 years, a disastrous 8 years. A man who was just ticking his bucket list in office and gloried in his integrity while the country fell apart. And his officials did whatever they wanted with our common patriarchy. Not too long ago, Nobel laureate Wole Soyinka, speaking on late President Buhari's time in office, said, quote, "I don't want to talk about Muhammadu Buhari's administration. I think it's best for my sanity just to avoid that overall question. I can take bits and pieces of Nigeria's present predicament, but I think for one's sense of balance, one must forget the existence of the Buhari administration," end quote. Late President Buhari's own daughter, Halima Buhari, said recently at former Information Minister Lai Mohammed's book launch about her father, quote, "My father was not unaware of the criticism leveled against him. He knew that many Nigerians felt that more would have been done or done differently. He heard the voices of those who were disappointed, just as he heard the voices of those who felt their lives had improved," end quote. Since former President Buhari's death in July of 2025, his legacy has been a subject of great debate. Did he lay the foundation for the troubles we Nigerians are facing today? As cases of corruption against his appointees pile up at Nigeria's anti-corruption agency, we ask, how could a man famed for his integrity let all these things happen under his watch? Was he a leader without followers? Where is the movement that pushes the Buhari philosophy? The man, my guest says, moved from soldier to statesman, where his strengths turned against him by those who learned his rhythms too well. Was he mismanaged state property? Was he a man stunned by the gap between the promise of a movement and the reality of government? A president who feared being called a dictator and hesitated to sack men who disappointed him? A man who had the wrong people in the right places and didn't change them for 8 years. Dr. Charles Omole's book on the late President Buhari has garnered a lot of controversy. Former Kaduna State Governor Nasir El-Rufai is appealing to all Nigerians, admirers and critics alike, to let the late former President Muhammadu Buhari rest in peace, criticizing many who were at that book launch, saying they gave fake tributes to Buhari in death. Meanwhile, they had neither his trust nor his respect in life. Author of the now controversial book, From Soldier to Statesman, The Legacy of Muhammadu Buhari, Dr. Charles Omole joins us tonight on Hard Copy. Dr. Charles Omole, welcome again to Hard Copy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So this book, I've read it. There are a lot of people who are very upset with some of the revelations made in this book. A lot of people, actually from the Buhari bloc of the All Progressives Congress, there are a few things. Number one, they feel like the wife of the late president shouldn't have said the things that she said in the book. And then the second issue that they have is the right of you writing this book. Some people, in fact, Honorable Farouk was saying in one of our programs, he said, "I've never met this man." Many people who worked with the late President Muhammadu Buhari didn't know you that much. Some people said they only spoke to you on the phone. So let's take those criticisms one after the other. The revelations by the former First Lady, and then the people are asking what right you have to put this particular book down.
Okay. Thank you. Well, in terms of the former First Lady, I think she's best able to answer that question. For those who want to be honest, there was telltale sign even during the Buhari administration of some of the discontent or the disquiet of the First Lady at that time. If you remember, there were media reports, for example, of the First Lady, Aisha Buhari, then saying that many of the ministers in her husband's government were not known to the husband. You know, there are lots of people that worked with them for victory were not included in the government. All these things were said. In fact, there was one time during, prior to the second term election, where she threatened not to campaign for the second term, you know, with her husband, if some things don't change. So these are not new things in that sense. I think what she felt she owed the nation was being able to, you know, flesh some of those things out and make people understand that if Buhari was to be judged by his intentions alone, Buhari will have been the best president we've ever had in the country. You know, but the challenge is, how do you translate that his intentions to reality? And what you will see in the book is all kinds of frustration by, engineered by the Cabal, things that the president will approve, and then the Cabal will make sure funds are not released for those things. Things that will, you know, that I can give specific examples as we go on of people going back to the president 10, 11 times to remind him that, look, president, you've approved this. The money has not been, you know, released. And the president kept saying, I will talk to them. You know, but of course, unknown to the people is that the Cabal controlled. The finance minister was under the control of the Cabal. The CBN governor was under the control of the Cabal. Sure is that the money was never released for those things, even though there was presidential approval. So the whole idea, therefore, is that this is not blaming Buhari at all. And those who are thinking it is an anti-Buhari book, they've not read the book. No family, no matter how they feel, will write an anti their husband book or their father's book. It's not possible. But I think what they were trying to do was to be balanced. You know, it's a 607-page book. All the tittle-tattle going on about the headlines, maybe maximum 20, 30 pages of the almost 607 pages. So if you look at the entire book, you'll find that it's actually a sympathetic book to Buhari. It's just making people to understand the limitations and constraints he worked under. But there are people who don't want to hear that Buhari does anything wrong or is a human. They don't like to hear that. They think he's a god. So for those people, even if you say Buhari coughs, they will fight you. You know, so you can't help that. On the question of me, well, I think if anything else, I'm probably someone like me is probably the best person to write the book, because I have no axe to grind. In that sense, you know, if I'd worked with him directly, they would say, okay, maybe I was speaking from a camp within the regime. You know, if I was in the opposition party, they would say, okay, maybe I was talking, you know, but the fact that I'm not a politician, I'm not in any political party, I'm not a member of any political party. So clearly brings a level of independence to it. And more importantly, like I said during the book launch, the family, not once did they ask me you interviewed Chief of Defense Staff, what did he say? Or try to editorialize the book. None at all, not once did they say remove this, had this, or they just said their truth the way it is. It just happened that a lot of the things they said were now corroborated by the people I interviewed who are not part of the family.
Did you at any point interview the late president's son, Yusuf? Because one of the things people are saying is that he wasn't at the book launch, and they said that kind of points to...
No, he was at the book launch.
Okay.
You see, he was at it because I greeted him at the book launch. You know, Nigeria is a place where confidence with ignorance is a bad combination. I mean, Yusuf doesn't speak much. It's not a talker. Let me put it that way. So he was there. I mean, in the chapter that I itemized all the children and what they said, you will see a segment about Yusuf there. You know, so he was there. So I don't see any. If anybody tried to interpret that to mean anything, that there's nothing there.
What about, so on the one person at least recently who's spoken up, well, a few people, former Kaduna State Governor Nasir El-Rufai says people should stop writing about this man, let him rest in peace. People are you're profiting over the death of this man who's not here to defend himself. And then there's also Honorable Farouk Aliyu, who's one of the heads in the chieftains in the APC and very prominent in the CPC bloc that's very loyal to late President Muhammadu Buhari. And he said this to me directly, he said no right-thinking person who loved the late President Muhammadu Buhari would be happy with what is written in this book about him. Says some things should have been left out.
What I did deliberately is I did, a narrative that is more, sort of interview, in nature, so that you know who said what. So I would say, okay, this is Chief of Defense Staff, this is what he said. This is this person, this is what, so that you understand this. So if you have issue with what has been said, go to the person that said it, not me that's recording what was said. So you see, Nigerians, the way they understand, they are looking at this thing, they are thinking, I said this, I didn't say this thing. This was what people said. So if you have an issue with what former Chief of Defense Staff said, don't blame the messenger. Go to him and say, why should you have said this? But they are not doing that. It's me they are now coming for to say, why did I write this? I was told, I didn't make it up. All the, practically except a few, practically all the interviews were recorded audio. So I have evidence of everything I wrote in the book. So this is not something I made up. So I really don't understand why people feel it's me that should be the subject matter rather than the people that actually said what was said.
Mm. All right, let's take a look at some of the things that you wrote in the book itself. You mentioned this cabal. You talked about it now. And a lot of things were said. I really do wish a lot of people would read all of the details about this cabal in the presidency. Does that cabal still exist today under President Tinubu, in your view?
Oh, yes. Every presidency in Nigeria since 1999 have their cabal, without a doubt.
As dangerous as the one that, because based on what I read in this book, that cabal was dangerous, especially dangerous to national development and dangerous to the president himself.
The challenge here is, like I wrote in the book, every leader, every president have their cabal. But for most presidents up until Buhari, the cabals tend to be friends, associates, people that have worked with them. They are people, if push come to shove, you could sack, you could dismiss. But I said, but what made the Buhari cabal more difficult is that they were his kinsmen. At least the top end of the cabal were his kinsmen. This was, and that's why if you read the book from the beginning, Buhari lost his father when he was about 3 years old. People like Mama Ndara and all these people, were people who he grew up with. I mean, Mama Ndara is a few years older than Buhari. So these are people that shaped, these are people he felt he owed a lot to growing up. They were built all their lives. All his life, rather, he's been with them. So when they now form this cabal, they are people you can't just sack.
You are facing right now the heat of that cabal. Can you handle the cabal? And you've actually upset two cabals, the cabal under late President Muhammadu Buhari, and then listening to you recently talking about a cabal in the Tinubu administration. That cabal will also be upset with you. Is that something you're ready for?
Well, the thing is, in terms of the cabal, I mean, what people don't understand, a lot of people on social media, not all of them, a lot of people on social media are foot soldiers of this cabal, and that's why largely I'm not engaging with them, because these are people who will take a bit of the book and misrepresent it. You will show them evidence that it's a mistake, they will still, so they are not people looking for evidence, they are not people rather whose mind can be changed by facts. There are people who are on assignment to besmirch your name and all that, but that comes with the territory. I mean, I have no issue with that. Okay. In terms of this government, their cabal, I think, well, at least nobody has come and to say that it's true that those cabal don't exist. So the fact that I merely say what was an open secret, it's not really a problem. And like I said in that interview you are referring to, President Tinubu is actually more in control of what's happening with the cabal, than many of his predecessors. So the current president is extremely smart.
It's a very interesting list of cabal leaders that you mentioned, including the president's son, including the son of the president. It's a very interesting list. But before we go on a break, I want to still talk about late President Muhammadu Buhari before we go on this break. So you said evidence-based leadership, but political science, with political science, we know that he had a particular type of leadership, and that leadership is called laissez-faire. It is called the laissez-faire style of leadership. Many people may not know it, but that is the system that he ran. But people who operate laissez-faire leadership are considered weak leaders because they, you know, as opposed to micromanagers, they let everybody do what they want to do. But the backlash of it is that sometimes things start to fall apart. And if, like you said, there are people that have been loyal to him for a very long time, it will be difficult to get them out. Was the late President Muhammadu Buhari, in your view, a weak president?
No, I wouldn't call him weak. Weak is, we could not do justice to the genius of the man. You know, I mean, he wasn't a weak leader, but I think just like every human being, he had his weakness. That's different from being a weak leader. For example, I think in the book I mentioned the occasion where a family member that when evidence was produced of what happened, President Buhari actually marched him out of the villa that night, shouted at him to get out of the villa. So I mean, so you can do what needs to be done when there is clear, unequivocal evidence. But the challenge is when you are dealing with cabals or anybody who operates in the government, even the bureaucrats. Part of what they are good at is covering their tracks. So trying to now say somebody did something and finding that ironclad evidence, that the kind of evidence Buhari felt he needed to act, was terribly difficult.
We'll go on a short break. But when we come back, we'll be talking about how he's been portrayed in several books, including yours. Everyone talks about his charisma, his character, his integrity, the genius of the man. The problem has always been drawing a parallel between the man that everyone talks about and the type of governance that the Nigerian people had to face for 8 years. A lot of people do not like this man because they do not believe that they got the dividends of democracy in the time when he was in office. So we'll be talking about that when we come back from this break. Please stay with us on Hard Copy. Welcome back to Hard Copy. If you've just joined us, we are speaking with Dr. Charles Omole, the author of this book. A book about the late President Muhammadu Buhari, from soldier to statesman, the legacy of Muhammadu Buhari. And one of the first things that he said in this book is that this is not a memoir, it's a report of what people have said. Thank you so much, Doc, for being with us on the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's talk about the man and the president. What do you make of that distance between the person and the president? And of course, these people who are facing all kinds of charges right now, many Nigerians believe he laid the foundation for the troubles that Nigerians are facing today.
It's possible for somebody to be an excellent individual, as Buhari was. In fact, one of the things even his greatest critic couldn't say was that Buhari was corrupt. You know, it was difficult for anybody to say that because he was not. You know, so, but when it comes to management, like you said, those who practice the kind of leadership style that he practiced, there's an assumption that you have appointed the best for each of those roles. If you have to leave them to just do their thing, then an assumption of competence exists, that those people in those positions know what they are doing. But in this case, that's not the case. There are lots of people that were there. I mean, largely, I mean, because of one thing or the other. As strong as Buhari was, he was an emotional human being. You know, you see people who will say that he worked with my dad in the 70s, so of course, you know, he now appointed me or whatever. You know, he is somebody who remembers those who have been good to him. And clearly, when he appoints them, the kind of guardrails that were needed to make sure that they performed were not put in place. And I think that, for me, is the weakness of that administration. But that could be mitigated by things like, was he fully aware of what's going on? I mean, if you understand how, there's one point in the book where when I was interviewing Bichi, the former DSS boss, where he actually said, at some point, and I'm quoting him now, he was concerned for the physical safety of the president. When they said that during the interview, I had to stop and tell him to repeat it. He said, yes, there was concern for the physical safety of the president. Almost like the president, well, I'm not putting words in his mouth, but my perception of what he said was that maybe the president felt maybe if he pressed too hard on the necks of some people, his own personal safety could be jeopardized. So it's a real challenge. I mean, when you have a president whose office is bugged, whose bedroom is bugged, every time when DSS do the sweep, as they call it, of his room and of his office, they find bugs every time. They find bugs. So question has to be, who puts it there? Who have access to his bedroom? So the fact that because automatically you would assume it was DSS that was bugging it, but this is the head of the DSS saying it's a shock to them. So the question is, who planted those things in those places? So the cabal existed. Nobody can even tell me anything otherwise.
I mean, I know that you say he wasn't a weak president, but that's what the issue is, Dr. Omole. The fact that all of these things into the villa is a fortress, okay? There's a camera everywhere. This presidential villa of ours, it's a fortress. It's not easy for you to do whatever. It's either there's some people are complicit in this, or you're not as strong as you think you are as president.
The narrative was that the moment he won the election and he moved to the villa, within 2 weeks, all his extended relations all moved to the villa and their children. And at that time, I think there's only one biological child or two of Buhari that was actually around at that time. So this extended family almost suffocated him.
Do you think that maybe some of the lapses, let's not call it weaknesses, all right? Let's say some of the mistakes that were made during his administration set the tone or put the groundwork for the problems that we're facing right now as Nigerians? Because that is the consensus out there, that this was 8 years wasted in governance.
Well, I wouldn't say it was 8 years wasted, but some of the issues that happened, some of the developments were things that were a surprise to Buhari himself. Let me give you two practical examples. One is, take the issue of the Naira redesign, for example. The Naira redesign the idea was presented to Buhari long before the election. And it was presented, again, maybe you can call it the naivety of the man. He didn't see it was presented as an anti-corruption, anti-vote buying process. The full implication of it and all that, I don't think really came to him until it was too late. Let's put it that way. So that's an example of how law of unintended consequence happens. Then also you have a situation where, take the issue of prior to the APC presidential primaries, how the cabal went to tell the service chiefs that they should. I narrated in the book that is Lawan that Buhari wants installed. And of course, when he met Buhari, Buhari said, no, he didn't, there's no such thing. But the question that came to my mind was that how many such presidents said will have been carried out by people who didn't have access to go and verify? So a lot of things will have been carried out in the name of Buhari that Buhari was never aware of. And for me, that is a danger. That's why this issue of cabal is important.
But it's not an excuse, is it? The fact that you didn't know is actually an indictment on you.
Well, let me put it this way. The fact that you didn't know, I mean, you don't understand how big Nigeria is until you sit in that place. You've been, you know how many reports you get every day from every state? There's no way you can be on top of everything yourself. That's why you need good team around you. I could write another book out of what I left out of the book. So if the people making all the noise online think what I've written in the book is bad, they should wait and see what I didn't include. There are things I didn't include that I felt were too hot to put because of our sensitive nature of our polity. I felt, this might cause trouble. Let me, I used my own assessment not to include it. Then there are things I didn't include because they were not corroborated. That was only one person told me about that situation. I did not include. So everything included there, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different people said it. That's why I felt confident enough to put it in the book. So there's a lot more where I didn't put in the book that I felt, for the sake of our piece of our polity, we should leave it alone. So it's more or less a way of telling the cabal that if they push too far, there's more where that came from. If they want to fight based on emotion or rather than logic, then we can throw more things in the air and let them see which one they will catch. So it's best for people to understand that if nobody will read this book from back to back and will say it's an anti-Buhari book. In fact, if I show you my inbox, it's very funny. On this side are people like Showore and the rest who have accused me of whitewashing Buhari's image, that I'm trying to, make him look good. That's on this side. Then on this other side are people, the Buharis, who are telling me, made the man look bad. And how can the same book have both in it? So that tells me most people from both sides have actually not read the book. Because if you have, you know all the things they are talking about now, maybe in about 2 chapters of a 22-chapter book. So what about the remaining 20 chapters? What's in them? So it's important for people to read this book for themselves. And it's not because I'm promoting the book, because all the proceeds of the book are going to Buhari family charities. So I'm not making it. So it's not me. So it's not about me. So people who think this is financially motivated are wrong. And even if you notice the book launch, there was no chief launcher, no financial element to the book launch to show you this was not done as a fundraising exercise.
I like that you said that, because that was actually where I was coming to, because the accusations about financial gains on the man who has died. But since you sorted that out, as we close, one thing that everyone keeps talking about is that you cannot accuse this man of corruption. He has integrity. Where is the Buhari movement? There are people in life who have inspired others, Sir Ahmadu Bello being one of such people. They have followers. Kwankwaso is famously a follower of Sir Ahmadu Bello, and moved that Kwankwasia movement based on the thinking processes and the ideals of this man who, was such a legend to them. Now we have the late President Muhammadu Buhari. Oh, great man of integrity. Everyone loves him. Okay. Where is the movement? Where did he replicate himself? Who are the people who are like him that are carrying on his legacy? Is that something that is still on the way? Is it something that we'll see in the future? Or was this man just by himself, I'm a good man, I'm a good man, I'm a good man, and didn't replicate himself in anybody? Was he a leader without followers?
Actually, that is an excellent question. And I think therein, for me, lies what I call a substantial weakness of Buhari as a man. Succession is not accidental. Succession has to be deliberate. And I think that is what is now exemplified in the so-called Buhari movement, where it has become such a broad church, where you have people within the movement that actually don't share Buhari's values. A lot of the people who are so-called Buharis don't share the kind of value that Buhari had. And that is a challenge of the fact that what Buhari had cannot happen by accident. It has to be deliberately curated. And the fight that is happening right now is who can control the bulk of the Buhari vote and Buhari supporters against next election. That is a challenge that's going on right now. But if they want answer to that, they should come and see me for political consultation.
Well, unfortunately, there's never enough time on this program. But I want to thank you so much, Dr. Charles Omole, for giving us this. Thank you for your writing. And thank you for being with us on Hard Copy. A Merry Christmas to you and yours. And we wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
That's Hard Copy this week. I'm Kayla Megwa. Merry Christmas, and we'll see you in the new year.